and welcome to meeting number 11 of the House of Commons Special Committee on Afghanistan, created pursuant to the order of the House of December 8th, 2021. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to House's order of November 25th, 2021. I would like to remind all those present in the room to please follow the recommendations from public health authorities as well as directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021 to remain healthy and safe. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me, as we may need to suspend for a few minutes to ensure all members are able to participate fully. I'm going to go in brief on a committee business before we go to the minister. For the meeting on May 9th, the Minister of National Defense and Canadian Armed Forces are scheduled for the meeting on May 16th. We will begin in camera for drafting instructions, and the analysts will be providing a detailed outline for consideration prior to the meeting. Nothing is in stone until the committee considers and adopts the report, but given our limited time on May 16th, it is my hope that the document can be of help to focus our discussions on that day. Following the drafting instructions, we will resume in public on May the 16th for two panels of witnesses for 45 minutes each. And then on May 30th and June 6th, we will consider the draft report that will enable us to complete our work in time for presentation in the House on June the 8th. So now with this, I hope there is no questions from the members. I'm going to proceed to the witnesses. So I would now like to welcome on behalf of all members, the committee members with us today. We have Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable Melanie Joly. Accompanying the minister are Associate Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Cindy Termor-Shavijan, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Consular Security and Emergency Management, Julie Sunday, Assistant Deputy Minister, Paul Thopel, and joining us online are Assistant Deputy Minister and Political Director, International Security and Public Affairs, Hadi Hulan, and the Assistant Deputy Minister, Global Issues and Development, Peter McDougall. I understand that, Minister, you will be joining us for the first hour and that your officials will be with us for the second hour. Is that correct?
Suk, you're always right.
Thank you, Minister. With this, I would like to thank the Minister and the associates, and I would love to give the floor to Minister for 5 minutes for opening remarks. Minister, welcome, and 5 minutes are yours to present.
Thank you, Suk. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Donc, bonsoir, chers.
Good evening, fellow parliamentarians. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this important discussion and take part in this meeting, this terrible situation in Afghanistan. The Afghan people have endured decades of conflict and instability, and the difficulties of life there since the Taliban took power cannot be overstated. Even if I wasn't the Minister of Foreign Affairs when Kabul fell, I can tell you that our full government, Global Affairs Canada, my colleagues, went to great lengths to evacuate Canadian citizens, permanent residents and their families. These efforts are ongoing, and my colleague Minister Fraser, who appeared before you last week, shared the details of this during her appearance. I'd now like to take this opportunity to congratulate their hard work in this particular file.
Evacuation. The period leading up to the fall of Kabul last summer was a time of growing insecurity and uncertainty. By mid-July, a full month before the evacuation, all remaining Allied military and intelligence assets in Afghanistan were confined to Kabul. Canada's embassy staff were also preparing for the prospect of a temporary closure of our mission in Kabul as the Taliban moved towards the capital. I want to underline the complexity and challenges of this task and the work of our Foreign Service, Immigration, and Canadian Armed Forces personnel undertook to make it possible. In July and into August, Canada implemented an immigration program for Afghan that were most at risk and undertook a large-scale evacuation. I want to thank Afghanistan's neighboring countries such as Pakistan, Kuwait, the UAE, and Qatar for their support in welcoming refugees. We remain in close contact with allies and partners in the region to help them to get as many people out as possible. En reconnaissant la détérioration de la situation.
Last summer, in acknowledgement of the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan, Canada committed to resettle at least 40,000 vulnerable Afghan refugees under the special immigration measures. Of these, we have planned to welcome 18,000 individuals and family members. You've heard witnesses who've appeared before your committee. It's not easy to get folks out of Afghanistan. The obstacles that are the most difficult to overcome is safe and reliable routes out of the country, the lack of stability domestically, and the exit requirements that continue to change at checkpoints and international crossings. We're working with local partners and neighbouring countries to overcome these obstacles and to find solutions for Afghans who wish to come to Canada.
Afghanistan's humanitarian situation was among the world's worst crises. The Taliban takeover has only worsened the situation. It threatens to wipe away decades of progress. Afghanistan is today on the brink of universal poverty, and we are particularly concerned about growing food insecurity throughout the country and the backsliding of women and girls' rights. My colleague, Minister Sajjan, is working hard to ensure Canada is supporting humanitarian partners who are providing life-saving assistance in Afghanistan. So far this year, Canada has committed more than $143 million in humanitarian assistance to help people in Afghanistan and Afghans in neighboring countries. We'll continue to call on the Taliban to ensure that aid workers, including women, have unimpeded access to those in need. I now want to speak to an issue that is very close to my heart. While we continue to press the Taliban to respect international humanitarian law and human rights, particularly the rights of women and targeted communities, we have seen significant step backward in recent months. The situation Afghans are facing, in particularly these vulnerable groups, is absolutely terrible. And we're deeply concerned by the growing reports of violence and human rights abuses. Civilians, journalists, human rights defenders, government employees, and former members of the Afghanistan National Defense and Security Forces are also being targeted. We continue to call on the Taliban to honor their promise of amnesty. I also cannot overstate our condemnation of the Taliban's decision to reverse their commitment to allow all girls to return to school at the secondary level. Because of their actions, the prospects for a better life are being denied to girls. Access to education is a human right to which every woman and every girl is entitled. Canada has been an advocate for a coordinated effort by the international community to pressure the Taliban to uphold human rights. We're also exploring how to concretely continue our support to Afghan women and Afghan human rights defenders. I've talked to David Sproul, our special envoy to Afghanistan. I've raised this matter with my counterparts across the globe, including Tony Blinken, many times, of course, from the United States, but also to the European Union, to Germany, to the Netherlands, to Indonesia, to Qatar, to the UAE, to Kuwait, to Egypt, to Pakistan, to Norway, to Finland and Sweden. And my deputy minister has also traveled to Pakistan, Qatar, and Kuwait. Obviously, we've raised this as a country at the UN, In this area, Canada welcomes the strong human rights mandate of the UN mission to Afghanistan following the Security Council's renewal of the mission on March 17. We also welcome the appointment of Richard Bennett as the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Afghanistan. The Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan has had profound implications for regional stability and for global security. The Taliban is a listed... Yes.
Please wrap up.
Yes.
That would be good.
Of course. So we know that the Taliban is a listed terrorist entity under Canadian law. And because of this, coupled with a security situation on the ground that is difficult, we have no longer a footprint in Afghanistan. I'm convinced you will be having questions for me on this very issue. And of course, I'm pleased to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. And now we will proceed to the honourable members for the first round. And starting the round is Honourable Chong. Honourable Chong, please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for appearing. Quick request, quick question, then some more substantive questions. Officials from your department said they would provide us with a written answer about when Canadian officials last made representations to the Chinese officials about Hussein Jalil. We did receive a written answer, but it wasn't an answer to the question. So I'm wondering if officials wouldn't mind following up with a written answer to us on this issue, because it's important for.
Yeah, it's not linked to the committee, but yes.
Yes.
We, of course, will provide that
Yes,
information.
I just wanted to follow up for the Foreign Affairs Committee. I know this is tangentially related, but do you have an update as to when the Indo-Pacific strategy will be completed?
So are you acting as a member of the Committee of Foreign Affairs right now, or Committee of Afghanistan?
Afghanistan is
but
arguably...
it's okay, Michael. I'll answer the question. So yes, we're working on the Indo-Pacific strategy.
Yep.
Paul is working day and night on this, but he has to work more, Paul. Yes, we will obviously present an Indo-Pacific strategy. That's one of the reasons why we together and others went to the Indo-Pacific. And I was in Indonesia and Vietnam.
Any sense of timing? Weeks, months, 6 months from now?
You know, I'm an impatient person in general.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Question regarding the National Resistance Front. Have you met recently with representatives from the National Resistance, Afghanistan's National Resistance Front? What, if anything, is the Government of Canada doing to provide moral or material support to the National Resistance Front? Have there been discussions with allies regarding the National Resistance Front in Afghanistan?
So I know my department has been in contact with the National Resistance Front. I have not met with them personally, but we know that they do important work, and at the same time, David Sproul has been also very much apprised of the issue. David Sproul is our special envoy for Afghanistan. And good news, because he had an interim posting, and we recently announced that he would be permanent in his position, because obviously we're very concerned with what's going on in Afghanistan. He's still based out of Doha, but we want to make sure that he continues to do his work.
Okay, so the government is broadly supportive of this organization. Is that a safe?
We are in contact with them.
Okay, so the government's in contact with them, but doesn't have a formal position.
Not yet.
On them. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that answer. I'd like to raise an issue that has brought to the attention of this committee recently. There's about 40 signatories to a submission that we received. These were locally engaged staff on the ground in Afghanistan, and they were given severance payments and pensions for their work that they had done for Canada, but when they filed their 2021 taxes, they were hit with taxes as if they were Canadian residents. And so it seems to me that there's a question of fairness here, because the work that they had done was in Kabul and in Afghanistan, not here in Canada, and the work was done before they were permanent residents of Canada. and residents of Canada for the purposes of the Income Tax Act. And so while the agency may be following the letter of the law, the Canada Revenue Agency, it doesn't seem to be consistent with the spirit of our commitment to Afghans who had a significant and enduring connection to Canada. So I'm wondering if you are working with your colleagues to seek a resolution to this matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is. I was made aware of this situation recently, and yes, we are looking into it. Because obviously we want to make sure that there's a level of fairness that is being met when dealing with this issue. And I also will follow up with my deputy minister on this issue.
Okay. And just more of an open-ended question. This is your last appearance in front of our committee before we go into drafting instructions to report back to the House as they've ordered us. We'd like to include recommendations in that report to assist future governments in the execution of their role. I'm wondering what advice you can give to this committee about what we could have done better in evacuating Afghans from Afghanistan, particularly Afghans who have an enduring and significant connection to Canada last August. Because it seems to me that some of our allies did a better job than we did. We evacuated some 3,500 Afghans by the end of August. But if I look at the United Kingdom, they evacuated 11,000 people. Mm-hmm. And NATO allies, particularly the U.S., evacuated over 70,000 people. So I'm wondering what lessons can be learned from this that we could include in our recommendations that would assist future governments.
So I see your question is definitely valuable, Michael, because indeed the goal of this committee is to do better in a difficult situation, to be able to provide recommendations to always do better in difficult situations. And definitely, I would say that not only Canada, but also the world, particularly NATO allies, took note of what happened in Afghanistan when dealing with other issues, including Ukraine. That being said, I think you have to compare oranges with oranges. And as you well know, but Canada had left Afghanistan since 2014. And so we didn't have a very strong military presence on the ground, which was different, obviously, from the Americans and from other NATO countries. And therefore, that limited also our capacity of getting people out. That being said, we were able to work with some of these like-minded countries to get people out while our presence was already limited. And of course, hindsight is 2020, but at the time, and I was not minister.
Sorry to interrupt, Minister.
I can continue to answer.
Big stop, and it's 7 minutes. Okay, so now we'll proceed to Madam Dema for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Clerk, when the chair starts speaking, there's a terrible echo on Zoom. If someone could look at that. Minister, thank you so much for being here today. And you touched on it briefly in your remarks, but I wondered if you could just expand a little bit. One of the things that has troubled me deeply that Canadians just are not talking about is what's happening to women and girls in Afghanistan. I don't know that Canadians are even aware of what's happening to girls, to schools being closed, the fact that women can't travel without a male escort. Secondary schools were closed. I'm not sure if they've reopened or not, but curriculum has been changed to put a focus on religion rather than academics. What is Canada doing to speak out about this, Minister? And will these actions of the Taliban make it more challenging for not only Canada, but other countries to engage with them?
Thank you, Pam. That's a really good question. So obviously, one of the things over the years from successive governments that I think Canada can be proud of is the fact that we were able to help educate for 2 decades women and girls in Afghanistan. This was a priority, and the backsliding of women and girls' rights is extremely preoccupying. When I say extremely preoccupying is we're seeing that indeed they don't have access to secondary level school. Also, you mentioned it, Pam, the question of free movement. So the fact that they are extremely limited in their movement, they're also being restricted in terms of what type of clothing they can wear. So in terms of their dress, and also we know that they cannot be able to have access, like I mentioned, to free movement, but without a male escort. These are just examples, but this is also against the form of. It was part of the amnesty's negotiation conditions at the time, whereby women and girls' rights needed to be respected, ethnic communities needed to be respected, overall human rights needed to be respected, which included also the fact that public protests could be respected. And now what we're seeing is people are arrested, detained. Also, it was clear in the amnesty negotiation that there would be no retaliation against the people that were part of the former regime. And what we've seen since the beginning, since August, is more than 500 have been killed. So clearly, the situation in Afghanistan is even worse now than it was in August. And so obviously one of the biggest tragedy is indeed what is going on with women and girls, but also the overall human rights issue is a problem. Now, what are we doing? We're raising it directly. Also, every time David Sproul, our special envoy, meets with the Taliban, along with other ambassador and special envoys, they raise it. And we've raised it, obviously, at the UN and many multilateral organizations. And I've raised it bilaterally with many other countries, particularly the EU and, well, organization. Yeah.
Can I ask, Minister, on that? And I know you've raised it numerous times, and I know that, like myself, you're very passionate about this issue. Could you raise it more here at home? Because I think if Canadians actually knew what was going on, they would be as outraged as we are. And I think it's something that they're just not aware of how far things have gone backwards since August. You mentioned David Sproul, though, and I just wondered, would you be able?
Will do,
Sorry,
Pam.
go ahead.
And thank you for asking the question. And I hope the journalists watching us right now will actually raise it as well.
I agree. Thank you. You mentioned David Sproul, and I wondered if you could expand for us his role and what he is doing on the ground, along with for Canada and with our partners.
Well, good question. So David is actually representing Canada, but he's based out of Doha. Many of the special representatives are based in Qatar right now because obviously no country in the world have recognized the Taliban as a legitimate government. And so many of our like-minded partners are there. And usually what we do, along with countries such as Australia, Norway, the UK, even the US, our special envoys have been in groups meeting with the foreign minister from Afghanistan when he comes to Qatar. It is our way to engage without recognizing the legitimacy of the Taliban government, because for us, recognizing the Taliban regime is a red line that we don't want to cross.
Thank you, Minister. I have 4 seconds left, so I'll just leave it there. Thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Damoff. And we will move to Mr. Brunel Desaep for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Miss.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you very much, Minister, for being with us today and for sharing your invaluable time with us. It's most appreciated on this extremely important study. Earlier, you said that the Taliban is listed as a designated terrorist group. So NGOs, Canadian NGOs, are having trouble doing their work on the ground in Afghanistan. And I'll read the description of the resolution 2615 of the UN. The Security Council has determined that humanitarian aid and other means of addressing Afghans' needs are not a violation of the sanctions regime, which involves blocking their assets. Is Canada upholding this UN resolution? Response. Well, there is a problem with how the Canadian Criminal Code is drafted, or at least how it's being interpreted, because it hamstrings Canada's humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. Now, when it was drafted, it was in the wake of September 11th, and things were very different at the time. Now, we are facing a situation where all indirect assistance, including the payment of taxes and humanitarian aid, are such that there is a breach of the criminal code as a result. So I'd be very curious to know what solutions will be put forward by the committee and what recommendations will be made. Question: how is it that Canada is one of the only countries that hasn't made changes, knowing how our criminal code is, when our NGOs have been calling on changes for some time, even moved a unanimous motion to overturn it, and the only party that stood in the way was yours. And this doesn't make sense. In fact, NGOs were very disappointed about the Liberal Party's vote on this. So we want to know when the Liberal government is going to move on this and address the problem with the Canadian Criminal Code, because for the time being, there's no movement here. Response. Well, that's why parliamentarians' work here is so important, and I thank you for raising this issue. And I think that any of the committee's recommendations would be relevant. Canada must, but hold on a sec. Do we need a recommendation from this committee when we know full well that this problem exists? You just mentioned it. So if everyone agrees, why not move ahead? Well, I would be pleased to work alongside all the parties on this issue. I'm very glad to hear you say this, and I'm sure journalists are listening. Your party voted against the motion that we moved. And let me read an email that I received yesterday from NGO that prefers to remain anonymous. We understand them on that. I received it yesterday, and I was a bit saddened to read it. I'll share it with you, and perhaps it'll put more pressure on you. Not putting in effect the UN resolution hampers the work that we can do, because we cannot invest any government money in action on the ground in Afghanistan. We have to breach our contracts. If this resolution were upheld, well, the Canadian Criminal Code could be amended and we could do the job that we need to do in Afghanistan, and they go on and on. These are folks. You've just mentioned how the extent to which Afghans are suffering because we can't amend our criminal code to address this situation. Response. Listen, we have provided assistance to NGOs in Afghanistan, millions of dollars. Understood. Now, the other thing here is that we are pleased to entertain all the committee's recommendations, but there is a red line that we will not cross, and that is the recognition of the legitimacy of the Taliban government. Well, I don't think NGOs are talking about that. Well, I'd be pleased to entertain your recommendations and work with you, Mr. Giuseppe, and the Bloc Québécois on this issue. Well, thank you very much. You know, my telephone is always by my side, and I'd be more than pleased to answer your calls. Now, I asked a question on the 4th of April. Mr. Topil was in attendance, and there was no response to the question. And I'm looking at the guest list this evening, and I thought I'm delighted to ask this question today of Mr. Topia. Now, Mr. Topia, did your department issue legal advice about changes to the Canadian Criminal Code that our NGOs have been calling for? And you didn't answer the question at that time, so I'll ask it again. Has there been legal advice issued? Failing that, say no. If it has, please say yes. So please go ahead and respond. Well, if I could just take a stab at that question on behalf of my colleague. Alexei, if you have any recommendations on this issue, I'd be pleased to continue the dialogue with you and to note the Bloc Québécois stance on this. If the Bloc Québécois is saying we are ready to amend the criminal code, that's what we want, such that there would be no recognition of the Taliban regime, but with a view to finding an appropriate mechanism, I'm prepared to have that conversation with you. That's not my question. Has there been legal advice issued by the department? Response, writ large, we abide by all our legal advice, and this has to do with cabinet confidentiality, and therefore my colleague is not in a position to respond to that question. But how is national security affected by the fact that a legal advice has been issued or not been issued? Response. Well, the important thing is to determine how we can help Canada to... Has there been legal advice issued or not, please? Has there been legal advice issued? I hope journalists, I hope the media is listening. This is cabinet confidentiality at stake. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno de Sept. And now we'll go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and her officials for coming to our committee. I'd like to actually just ask this question then. Has your office received any legal briefings from Justice on how Canada can ensure those doing humanitarian aid work are not going to be deemed to be in violation of Canada's anti-terrorism laws?
So you're essentially asking similar questions that Alexei Brunet asked me in French, Jenny, and my answer would be similar to what I said in French, which is, if it's the position of the NDP in the context of this committee regarding the fact that there should be an amendment to the criminal code, which doesn't have an impact
Thank you, Madam.
I'm sorry, I just want to finish.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt.
Mr. Chair, I will
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to interrupt for a minute because I don't need to get the answer in English because I heard it by translation, Madam Chair. And it's my time, so I'd like to actually ask questions.
I will just finish my answer. So yes, please go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Now on, I would ask all honourable members to go through the chair so then I can control better. And I would love to give time for the minister to respond. If a member has to interrupt, then they should come through the chair and let me be respectful of the time. So please go ahead, Madam Kwan.
A point of order, Mr. Chair. I just want to get clarification with you then. I asked the minister a question, which was basically a yes or no answer. I don't need the minister to tell me what she said in French, in English, because we have fantastic interpreters who's doing that job, and I'm wearing my headpiece and I can understand the answer. So I'm actually seeking an answer, not a repeat of the answer. If I could direct the minister.
Point of order, Chair.
If you can direct the minister to answer the question.
Point of order.
Mr. Chair.
I have a point of order, Chair.
Go ahead, please.
So, Chair, I think the issue here is just that the member asked a similar question and the minister was giving a similar response. I think if the member didn't want a similar answer, she shouldn't have asked a similar question. But I also think it's important to be cordial. Literally 3 seconds into the minister's response, the minister was interrupted. And I just don't think that that's respectful. So, Chair, I just think the minister should be given at least a few moments to respond basically to the question before the member jumps in, and whether it's through you or otherwise.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, that really wasn't a point of order, though, Mr. Chair. And I would appreciate actually an answer. It was a different question.
Madam Kwan, if you can give me a few seconds now. As you know, I always been respectful. I never intervened when you fellows had, direct conversation. But let's, for the sake of, no further arguments. So let me talk through the chair, and then I will make a decision. Even if minister takes a few seconds longer, I will make sure, Madam Kwan, your time is been compensated, and I have stopped the watch. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you to the minister as well for understanding. Madam Kwan, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking for a yes or no answer from the minister, but not an explanation and repeat of what she already said.
Okay, Minister, you want to respond?
So my answer is, if it's the NDP position that the Taliban regime should not be recognized in the criminal code, or if it's the position of the NDP that the Taliban regime should be recognized by the mentioned in the criminal code, but at the same time that there's a mechanism for humanitarian aid, I would love to know it. And so looking forward to working with her. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And Madam Kwan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would urge the minister to read the answer then, because I'm on record with respect to what my suggestion is in dealing with this issue. I'd like to ask the minister this question. Can the minister advise if her office or she has been offered any assistance by allied countries with biometric collection?
Minister, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jenny. That's a really good question because I've reached out to many countries to find ways to be able to have safe passage in Afghanistan, including the EU directly and including also Germany. And also, obviously, we had conversation with Qatar, UAE, and Pakistan. The issue is definitely the question, yes, of biometrics, and also making sure that security of the biometric facility be ensured.
Sorry. My question was, has the minister or the minister's office been offered this assistance by allied countries, yes or no?
So we've reached out proactively, and I've reached out proactively.
Is the minister saying that her office or herself have not been offered assistance by allied countries for biometrics collection?
I've had many conversations with many countries, including Pakistan, UAE, and Qatar on this, like I mentioned. But our goal has been always to make sure that the biometrics could be done safely, and also we wanted to work particularly with NATO allies on this issue.
It's been brought to my attention that the ministry GAC actually has been offered by allied countries to do biometric collections for Canada in their offices or in mobile offices. That was back in January, to my understanding. And yet, to date, this has not been taken up. Why not?
Well, we have clear security concerns that because of the fact that there are terrorism groups in Afghanistan and in the region, that any form of presence can be targeted, and therefore that there's a security issue. And so that's been the challenge of the government of Canada, Jenny, is how can we make sure that there are biometrics and people brought to Canada, and meanwhile not creating a security issue for Canadian diplomats on site.
Sounds to me the minister is saying allied countries are not capable of doing biometrics, which is concerning with respect to that. I'd like to ask the minister this question. A group of 35 lawyers, Sajan Associates, were hired by the Ministry of Justice to represent the embassy and many Canadian departments with interests in Afghanistan. They worked for the embassy for 9 years. They all applied for the special immigration measures. GAC gave them a verbal confirmation that they would be provided an invitation to apply, but to date, no invitation has arrived. I wrote to the minister about this, both this minister and the Minister of Immigration. My question then is this: does the minister keep track of the referred cases to IRCC for processing?
25 seconds.
Yes, well, definitely. I work with my colleague Sean Fraser. Obviously, I've seen your emails and I've answered all of them with great pleasure. And at the same time, it is important for us to follow up. And definitely, this is something that the Ministry of IRCC is in charge of.
I raised that with the Minister of Immigration, who seemed surprised and said, "Oh, I haven't heard that." And of course, I have a list of these individuals who's applied and has gone nowhere. I did receive responses from the minister acknowledging receipt of these letters, but actually no real response. So it would be great for the officials to table any documentations to the committee to show that they have, in fact, follow up with IRCC and what the expectations are and what will happen with GAC, with these individuals that are being left behind.
Thank you, Madam
We
Kwan.
will do so. We will do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to the second round. And I will start with my own member here. We have 17 minutes. So, okay. So we'll go 5 minutes for Madam Finley. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and through you to the Minister, it's our understanding that no arrangements were made with any of our allies to assist with the IRCC mission, either before or after the fall of Kabul. Why is that?
I'm sorry, Karen, and Mr. Chair, it's my fault. Can you please repeat the question?
Sure.
Sure.
That-
I'll stop the restart. I'll
Yeah.
restart the watch again. Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Go ahead, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, it's our understanding that no arrangements were made with any of our allies to assist with the IRCC mission, either before or after the fall of Kabul. Do you know why that would be?
Before the fall of Kabul, I would not have known, so I'm not aware. And after the fall of Kabul, until my nomination appointment, I have no information to that regard.
My next question is, why did Canada leave Afghanistan 2 days prior to all of our allies who were still evacuating people from within the country actively?
So, as mentioned, I was not privy to that information. I know my colleague Garneau at the time, Mendicino and Sajan were working 24/7 on this. But I think that Heidi Hulen, who's on Zoom, could provide some information as to the intelligence information that we had at the time.
Madam Pilley, you want Heidi Hulen to respond?
Sure, if she has a
Okay.
quick answer.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me well? Oh, sorry.
We do.
Yes, so I can't speak to the question of 2 days before. I believe that we have some
Thank
of
you very
our,
much.
our
Thank you.
colleagues from-
Thank you. If you can answer, never mind. My next question is, during the fall of Kabul, Ukraine sent a C-130 and took out of Afghanistan one flight full of people that qualified for our special immigration measures and brought them to their country for safe passage to Canada. Ukraine then stopped because Canada would not make the commitment to get them from that country. Why did Canada not make arrangements to continue in this fashion with Ukraine, and why are there Afghan families that would qualify under the SIM still left there in Ukraine?
Minister.
Yeah, thank you. So different countries took different measures. What we did is to work with definitely the Americans, but also working with Pakistan. At this point, we are at 12,000 refugees that have come to Canada. I must say, because I've had many conversations about this issue over the last weeks and months, we're one of the countries that have received the most Afghan refugees. And every time I raise the issue, from my conversations with Blinken to Baerbock in Germany to Borrell at the EU, or even, Truss from the UK, they recognize the leadership of Canada in welcoming 40,000 refugees, which is which is clearly not the case in these different countries.
And we appreciate those efforts. The problem is a lot of those were already out of the country before the fall of Kabul. And we are really, in this committee, trying to understand what happened around the time of the evacuation and since. In Ukraine, Afghans who were evacuated were not offered any accommodations. In Pakistan, accommodations are only offered to a select group, and they are hard to access through IOM. Why has Canada still not addressed the accommodation issue that is plaguing this response?
Mm-hmm. So we had several conversations with Pakistan, and my deputy minister went to Pakistan. Pakistan was decided to take in Afghan refugees without any form of papers, so undocumented refugees until November. And afterwards, they decided to change the course of their approach and basically decided to ask for these documents, which has been a challenge because passport issuance in Afghanistan has been an issue. So we've been working with the Pakistani government, again, 2 days ago, another charter flight of 336 Afghan refugees arrived to Canada, and will continue to do so, and will continue to engage with other countries that have Afghan refugees within their own jurisdiction.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Finlay, and of course my own member. And now we'll go to Mr. El-Khoury for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you, Minister, for your presence here this evening. I can tell you that all Canadians appreciate tremendously your work. We watch you travel from one country to another just to help the Afghan people and also for Canada's image on the world stage. First question, what are the food challenges in the Afghan situation? And if you could talk to food insecurity in Afghanistan, please. Response. Well, the situation in Afghanistan is shocking. It's terrible. It's worse than it was back in August, as I mentioned earlier in my responses. Not only is it terrible, but clearly poverty is rampant and has been exacerbated by poor government, which doesn't look after the population, and it's exacerbated also by the fact that the government in place, that no country in the world acknowledges, I might add, that government on numerous occasions has flouted its international obligations and human rights obligations, such that humanitarian aid is difficult to get through. Now, that said, we've invested over $125 million through a number of UN organizations. For example, the UN Food Programme, the UN World Food Programme, and UNICEF to provide assistance to Afghan children. We're also working with a number of other organizations. However, I should point out, and this is a concern of mine and my government's, in light of the questions asked by my colleagues, Ms. Kwan from the New Democrats and Mr. Brunel Duceppe from the Bloc Québécois, clearly the Canada's criminal code, which identifies the Taliban as a designated criminal terrorist organization, is hampering grassroots assistance to the Taliban people on the ground. And that's a huge concern to me. And I'd be very interested to hear the recommendations of this committee. If we were able to depoliticize this issue and take a nonpartisan approach, it would be good for the Afghan people. Question. Now, there's Mr. David Spool, Canada's special envoy, who's doing an extraordinary job. And his meetings with the Taliban, were there to be an agreement, would the Taliban uphold that agreement, or is it useless negotiating with them? Response, the Taliban do not respect their undertakings whatsoever. Our approach has been to have our special envoy engage with other ambassadors, the Taliban, by way of meetings in Doha with the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Afghanistan, and I say in inverted commas, Minister of Foreign Affairs, because that said, we don't recognize their legitimacy. And there's also been a number of bilateral conversations on consular cases to do with Canadian citizens. And that's the undertaking that David Spool has given. Now, David Spool is also in contact, as are we, with the Special Envoy of the United Nations, Robert Bennett, as well as our ambassador from the UN, Bob Ray, and the officials at Foreign Affairs, at the Foreign Affairs Department. Thank you very much. How would you describe Canada's coordination efforts with the international community when it comes to the situation in Afghanistan between September and today? Well, there's been a huge effort to coordinate. Now, has this led to concrete solutions in all cases? No, it hasn't, and I'll be very frank with you. That's where the problem lies. The fact of the matter is that the Taliban are not respecting the amnesty agreements, and the burden is on their shoulders rather than on those of countries like Canada. Now, at the same time as Canada is managing that situation, and I understand members' frustration and concern that you've been looking at this situation for quite some time, and I share your frustration as a minister. But know that the situation in Afghanistan is a problem for all NATO countries, for many countries across the world. Paul and I were in Indonesia recently, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke about her concerns about Afghanistan because it's creating a lot of instability in that region too, according to my counterpart. As a woman minister.
El-Khoury, your time is up, and we will go to Mr. Brunel Desaep for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Now, I'm not someone who gives up easily, so I'd like to come back to the question that I asked you previously. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this. Some said that, it seems to me that this is highly politicized. You've talked about national security, but if there has been legal advice issued, you don't have to tell us what it is, but if it hasn't been issued, well, then we're going to tell you that you're not taking this seriously. So is that why you don't want to answer the question? Alexei, honestly, I think that we are getting into the weeds here. What's most important is, can we find common ground here together with a view to providing humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan? That's the question that the committee is asking. Well, my question is whether legal advice has been issued by the department. It's not a complicated question. Response. Well, the idea here is to determine whether or not we can get the funds through and whether the criminal code is an impediment to getting that money released. And that's a question that I want to find solutions to amending the criminal code. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairperson, this is really not complicated. There are legal advice issued by many departments. So either it hasn't been issued, and that means you haven't asked for it, and that means your department hasn't done its job, because we have been asking for this for weeks, at the very least, at a bare minimum, legal advice. And if you're telling us that no legal advice has been issued, well, then you're not doing your job. And if you tell us that, yes, legal advice has been issued, well, we would like to know what that legal advice says. Alexei, I can reassure you that I always do my job. But the key thing here is to ensure that Canada's interest is protected, not only protected, but we are seeking to improve the situation out in the field, and I hope that we can work together. You don't need to hear the committee's recommendations. We can give them to you right away. If you want to save on time here, my objective is not to save on time. My objective is to depoliticize this issue so we can find common ground on this issue. If we can work together, if you can speak with the Conservatives, all you had to do was vote for the unanimous motion that I moved. You were the only party to vote against it. Well, I'd be pleased to continue this conversation offline, says the Minister.
Mr. Brunel Desaep, thank you very much. And your time is up. And we will go to the last honourable member for 2.5 minutes. Madam Kwan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to actually just follow up on the last question. Could the Minister advise what action will she take to ensure GAC refer people who apply to Canada but still have not heard from IRCC to receive an invitation, that they actually, in fact, receive the invitation before the quota of the numbers of the allocation runs out?
We will make sure to follow up with IRCC because definitely GAC has been kind of the bridge between the people that have applied at the beginning and then their process through RCC. we know that a lot can be done and must be done, and that's what we'll do.
Yes, well, I'm very concerned that, as with each passing day, people's lives are at risk because they're in hiding. I know that applications, some has been submitted 8 months ago and has been GAC approved in terms of the referral, and it's just sitting on IRCC's desk somewhere collecting dust. So I hope that the minister will motivate IRCC to get their job done, because otherwise it makes you look bad, which is not, I think, what they want to do. On a different question, with respect to Pakistan, because part of the issue is Pakistan not sort of moving forward with recognition of documentations. Could the minister advise what work has she been engaged in with Pakistan to ensure that they accept the documentations, such as single journey travel documents from Canada, so people can exit Afghanistan?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've heard it from my colleague Sean Fraser, who want to make sure that biometrics are made. This is clearly an issue because we want to make sure that obviously Canada's security is protected. Just to go back to your former question, because I think I didn't fully answer, but you asked me whether we receive offers of biometric services from allied countries, and I just wanted to let you know that that's not the case.
Well, then that's interesting. But with respect to allied countries, and for Pakistan to recognize our documentations, will the minister ask allied countries if they would collect biometrics on behalf of Canada or operate on the ground, seeing as they have boots on the ground to do mobile offices?
So that's exactly what I was trying to do with the EU and Germany, because we thought that that could be something that could be done. But at the same time, we're still in conversation. I hope this will continue to move in the right direction. But I must say, the security situation is such that it is difficult for us, but it is difficult for the EU and it's difficult for Germany. And I won't talk for them and put words in their mouth. But this is a collective problem, and it's not only a Canadian issue.
What about the idea?
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. So time is up. And now I'm, on behalf of the committee members, I want to thank the Honourable Minister for her appearance. Minister Jolie, thank you, and the very best to you. And now we will suspend for a few minutes to allow Minister to intermingle with the members and to leave. And we will continue with the officials shortly. Thank you. Proceed with the round of questions. I would request honourable members, if you're asking a question to a particular person, please name so as that honourable official can respond accordingly. So we will start with the first round. We will start with Mr. Garnet Genius for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the officials for being here. It's an honor for me to be able to be subbing at this committee. I serve as the point person for international development for our caucus, and I want to focus my questions on that issue, picking up on some of what's been already discussed. And I really appreciate the challenges here. We've got a very dire humanitarian situation. We want to do all we can to make sure resources don't end up in the hands of the Taliban. At the same time, I think Canadian organizations and Canadians individually and all of us here feel the imperative to see what we can do and to see if we can do more to help people that are in a really challenging situation. And I think one of the problems is that we have legal constraints that apply to Canadian organizations that may not apply to international organizations that we are funding. It seems to me that in these kinds of situations, Canadian organizations have constraints that relate to the possibility that any of their resources will end up in the hands of hostile actors. But large multilateral organizations that taxpayers are also funding are not subject to the same constraints. So I'd just like to hear a bit more from officials about what they think can be done specifically to remove the impediments that we're hearing about from stakeholders. I'm sure you're hearing about it as well, that make it harder for them to confront this really dire humanitarian situation.
So go ahead, please, officials, whoever want to
Sure.
take that.
I'm happy to start. It's a really important question. I think, like all of the members of this committee, we're really seized of the seriousness of the humanitarian situation on the ground, and it is growing worse. So I'm glad that you asked the question. I guess what I would say is that, our preoccupation is getting aid and support, particularly humanitarian assistance, to Afghanistan in a way that complies with the criminal code. And I know that all the members are very familiar with that issue. I should also mention that for multilateral organizations that are operating in Afghanistan and using the funds that we supply, they also work very hard to ensure that funding does not go to the Taliban through taxation, for instance, that Canada has provided. But maybe I'll turn the floor to Peter McDougall, who is our Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for this area, to follow up further.
I would like to hear from him in a moment, but can I just clarify? I think it's important that people hear what you said, that those criminal code provisions, although UN organizations may, and we hope, do their best to just not see money end up in the hands of the Taliban, at the end of the day, those criminal code provisions, which do apply to Canadian organizations, do not apply to them. Is that correct?
So what we do as the Government of Canada is work with those organizations to design our contributions so that Canadian funding does not go, for instance, to taxation to the Taliban. So we are stringent upon ourselves because the criminal code does apply to Canadian officials who write those agreements. So it's incumbent upon us, even working with multilateral organizations, to ensure that we are compliant with the criminal code.
Right. So it applies to you. It influences the way you engage, but it does not apply to them insofar as if we're providing funding for core funding and things, and they're using it at their discretion.
That's right. It applies to Government of Canada officials.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. I'd love to hear from the other gentleman as well.
Peter, over to you.
Mr. McDougall.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Yes, we have taken a number of mitigation measures. And just to clarify, we're working primarily with the UN institutions as well as the International Committee for the Red Cross. We use a variety of...
On a point of order, Mr. Chairperson, I think that our guest's microphone is not working properly, or it's difficult, at least for our interpreters, to do their job, and as they're working hard, we should help them.
We'll check. Madam Clerk, could you check? I have stopped the watch, Mr. Garner-Guinness, so as you know.
While we're working on that, can you just tell me how much time I have left?
2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
1 3/4.
It sounds like 2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah. Can we check if Mr. McDougall's...
Yes, can you...
Could you suspend for a moment,
Hear
please,
me okay?
Mr. Chair?
Well, I'll suspend. The meeting is suspended for a few minutes. Let me get that out of the way.
Mr.
You member, and I'm going to start the watch now.
Thank you. And I think you said I had 3 minutes left. So to the to the witness, I wonder if you can clarify if you think the current criminal code provisions as they apply are clear, or if they are sort of challenging to understand and how to navigate. Because my sense from civil society is that it's the provisions themselves, but it's also the sense of, I mean, if you put a foot wrong, then you're violating the criminal code, which is obviously very serious. So how can you help them, the private organizations that are operating this space, to really understand how to navigate within the circumstances?
Associate Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
Thank you. So Peter's really the expert on this, but I'll do my best to channel him. Look, I think that for our civil society organizations, they clearly want to do their jobs and do it well. I know that we have conversations with many of our civil society organizations to explain to them as best we can the situation and the criminal code provisions. This is obviously a really difficult area, but I guess I really can't say much more about how they interpret it and the challenges they're facing, but we know that they have come to us and spoken to us about them. I myself have spoken with some of these organizations, so we know it's a difficult reality for them.
Yeah, and I would just maybe invite some of those civil society organizations to submit briefs to this committee to inform its ongoing work, and I hope that you'll continue to look for options in terms of clarity around that legislation, how to make it work well, possible changes to the legislation or clear information. It just seems it's a huge problem, and I don't think we're where we need to be in terms of actually getting the support to people in this dire situation. So
yeah.
Thank you very much.
And we are
Mr.
definitely
Dennis.
looking at options.
Okay, appreciate that. And now we'll go to Mr. Baker for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our officials for being with us today, in person and virtually, and for your service to our country on the issues related to Afghanistan and otherwise. I'd like to ask you about the food shortage in Afghanistan, and the minister, in response to one of my colleagues from the opposition, spoke to this issue a little bit. But what I'm concerned about in particular is, and I want to build on what the minister was talking about, is that there are concerns that Russia's invasion of Ukraine could spark a global food shortage, in part because many countries in Africa and the Middle East rely on Ukrainian food exports, particularly wheat, but other food exports as well. And of course, the World Food Programme is reporting that since the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan, 50% of Afghans, as it is, are not receiving enough food. And so I guess my first question would be, how do you see Russia's invasion of Ukraine impacting countries around the globe in terms of their food supply, and specifically Afghanistan?
Thank you very much for the question. And I think we still can't access Mr. McDougall by the mics, correct? So in that case, I will respond, but I just wanted to check.
So let me suspend for a few seconds, and I'm going to stop the watch.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Madam Clerk, can you check?
No.
The honourable member, Mr. Baker.
I'm happy to respond to the question. I think you've raised a very, very good point in terms of the serious impacts that we are beginning to see as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think as all of the members know, both Russia and Ukraine are important food providers. Russia is also a major provider of fertilizers, so the impact is likely to be very significant. And some countries are much more dependent on exports from Russia and Ukraine of food items than others. So we see in particular in various countries in the Middle East a very, very heavy reliance on those exports. Lebanon, some of the countries in North Africa, also some of the countries in South Asia are very heavily dependent. So this is a real concern, and I know that Minister Joly, many of our senior officials in the department have been working very closely with allies to look at what we can do to address this, to make sure that there is as good a food supply and flow as possible, and that we're also looking at providing extra supports to some of these countries that are particularly affected. With respect to Afghanistan, I actually am not sure what the percentages of dependence they have on wheat from Ukraine, for instance. But as Minister Joly mentioned, the food security situation in Afghanistan was already quite serious prior to the takeover of the Taliban in August last year. There was a lot of concern with respect to a drought. And those conditions continue, the impact of climate change and an ongoing food security situation. So all that to say, the Government of Canada is intensely engaged with other countries around the world and with international organizations, particularly within the UN system, to look at anything we can do to ensure that those impacts are mitigated. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. And I still have approximately 2 minutes, Chair? 2.5?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. I'm trying the MP generous approach here. So what, in terms of, just to build on your answer, so what are some of the potential, what are some of the things that Canada is doing, and what are some of the potential measures out there to address the potential for global food shortages or even famines related to, specifically to Russia's invasion of Ukraine? I mean, I'm concerned about the impact on Afghanistan, but I presume that the impact on Afghanistan will be similarly felt in other countries. So what are some of the measures that are, you can't suddenly just supply, are there food reserves that can be tapped? How does that work? What can be done?
So I think that, as I mentioned, we're working very closely with the World Food Programme, with other UN institutions, looking at how we can ensure that supply chains remain resilient, and also identifying those countries that are particularly vulnerable. Because I think that is one issue, as I mentioned, some countries are much more vulnerable than others. There are some countries that are dependent for 70, 80% of their wheat on Ukraine, and clearly they will not be getting that amount of inputs this year. So really working with those countries to identify, where are those gaps and what can we do to assist in filling those and in ensuring that the World Food Programme and other organizations are able to work effectively in those places. So a lot of international coordination is ongoing.
Thank you. I don't think I have enough time for another question, Chair, so I cede the rest of my time.
Thank you. You still have 40 seconds, but if that's the case,
well,
thank
then
you,
I'll just take this
we'll
opportunity to thank our officials for being here and for all of their work and both on Afghanistan and on issues around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. We'll go to Mr. Brunel Desapp for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I'll take Mr. Baker's final 30 seconds. You can tack them on to my speaking time if you wish. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. Much appreciated your time and the answers you're being giving us, which is just so important for the drafting of our upcoming report and the recommendations that the committee will be making. Now, I imagine that if I ask you the same question that I asked of the minister, I'll be getting the same answer from you. Am I mistaken? Perfect. Good. Well, we've at least gotten past that. Now, these last couple of weeks, we've seen that the Islamic State may claim a number of attacks that targeted the Shiite minority. There's also an Azaris community here in Canada and we need to help them there. We would like the Azaris to be recognised as a persecuted group. For the time being, that has not been the case. What's holding us back? Why aren't they being recognised as a persecuted group?
And then pass the floor to my colleague, Paul Topol. All this to say, and my colleague Heidi Hulin can also speak with the security situation. We've also noted with real concern the growing number of attacks. And as you've rightly pointed out, a lot of them have been targeted towards minority groups like the Hazaras.
On a point of order, I haven't heard any simultaneous interpretation. I don't know if there's something wrong. If you could start your response again, please, without taking away from my time, please, Mr. Chairperson.
I will give you 20 seconds extra.
Okay. So, like you have pointed out, we have noted the growing number of attacks by Islamic State, Khorasan province in particular. Some of those attacks have been claimed by them. Some we think have actually been perpetrated by them. And many of them, as you point out, have been targeted against minority groups, particularly the Hazara, but not only the Hazara. So it is definitely an issue that we are noticing an uptick on. And I think even just this weekend, right in advance of Eid, over 50 people were killed in a mosque in Kabul. So it is a very serious matter. But maybe I can pass the floor to Paul Topol.
Oui, par rapport à la reconnaissance.
Well, what about the recognition of a persecuted group? That was my question, essentially.
Mr. Brunel Desapp, can we hear from Mr. Topol for a few seconds?
Yes, please. Of course, Mr. Chairperson, of course.
Minister, please go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So we are in discussions with our international law colleagues at the ministry with regards to that. And so it's taking some time just to get the jurisprudence in terms of what's the way forward. But definitely it is top of mind because we have been tracking for some time the persecution impact, particularly on the Hazara community. But quite frankly, as my colleague has noted, just broadly, ethnic communities at large in Afghanistan. So while the Hazaris have been the most noteworthy, it's not that. And that's why what David Spruill, together with like-minded special envoys, have been doing is trying to encourage the Taliban to foster a way forward on inclusive governance that respects what is a country that is significantly diverse in terms of ethnicities, notwithstanding the fact that the Taliban, based on Pashtun background, is the dominant. But as we've seen through the ages, it is more than just Pashtuns in this country. And we do need, I think, for a sustainable country going forward, a way forward for governance whereby all the ethnic minorities see themselves as part of that governance decision-making. And that's what we are advocating for through the UN, through David, and together, as the minister said, with many other countries.
Okay.
I do have some time left, Mr. Chair, yes. So just to emphasize that this is a really important request on the part of the Hazari community here, so we do need a follow-up, as you say in good English. So, another question. Has your department received lists of persons, of refuges that have been operated by Canadian individuals?
Question over to Paul Topple.
Mr. Topple.
So as the minister noted, since the fall of Kabul, in that very fluid situation, global affairs stepped up to be a focal point in terms of what was a dramatic increase in terms of volume of inquiries. We have received over 1 million inquiries through our intake mailbox, with more coming in still to this day. And so what we have is the due diligence protocol within the department that triages them, ensures that the bona fides that make that request related to whether they have a significant and or enduring relationship to the Government of Canada under the special immigration measures has been achieved. And then once we have done that assessment, then we turn that over to IRCC for processing.
Merci. Et là, j'ai une dernière.
Thank you. I have a final question, if I may. Canada has an international assistance policy which is highly feminist. There's a focus on that. And the United States cancelled the discussions with the Taliban late March because girls and women were being denied education in schools. So in this feminist lens, what is Canada... I know you're looking at me, Mr. Chairperson, but a very quick answer. What are we doing in terms of the feminist lens?
Thank you. Briefly, the time is up, but briefly answer, please.
Sure. I think this is something, as the minister said, we're engaged intensively on with allies and also with the Taliban through our representative in Doha. But I would also say we're working very hard to ensure with humanitarian partners that our humanitarian assistance is actually getting to the most vulnerable, including some of these minorities you've mentioned, but also women and girls.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno Desep. And I will go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the officials. At the last appearance, Mr. Topple was at this committee. He indicated that things were going well with Pakistan in terms of bringing Afghans to safety. Then things kind of changed and evolved, but then it was still kind of going. Can officials clarify for me, is it the case that Pakistan now is refusing to recognize Canada's documents, including the single journey travel documents or the letter of acceptance from IRCC, including a G number, which was something that they had done previously?
Mr. Topple.
Mr. Chair, there is no defined sustainable protocol that we have with Pakistan at this juncture. It's ad hocish. And what we're trying to do through our head of mission in Islamabad is engage constantly with the government of Pakistan to try to see whether they would re-engage in sort of a sustainable protocol at the border, at the Torkham Gate, so that we can allow single travel documents to be accepted. But it's right now a concern by Pakistan, in part because they have, as you know, millions of already refugees pre the fall. And they stopped in November, as the minister said, because they are worried about continuing to be a draw beyond those who have received, say, any documentation from Canada or like-minded countries for more Afghans to come over into their border. So that's why from Pakistan's perspective, it's a challenging situation to respond to many countries' requests to accept documentation from Afghans that would like to cross the border.
With respect to ongoing discussions with Pakistan, when was the last discussion with Pakistan on this issue that the GAC had?
Mr. Topple.
So as the minister said, I know the deputy minister went in the late fall, in order to have a high-level bilateral consultations whereby these issues were put. And I can't tell you at this juncture what was the latest interaction that our High Commissioner has had with the Pakistan government, but she has been charged from Global Affairs headquarters in terms of these type of issues as a top priority?
If officials then can table documentation back to this committee to advise us on when that last conversation took place and when they expect the next conversation would also continue the discussion, that would be much appreciated. Just give us sort of a progress update, if you will, since November, because I hope that work has been done since November. It sounds like it has, but to get that update would be much appreciated.
We'd be pleased to do so.
Thank you so much. Similarly, on the question with allied countries in the discussion around biometrics, the minister indicated that there's been ongoing discussions with respect to that. When was that last discussion had with allied countries for them to assist Canada in collecting biometrics in Afghanistan for us, or to operate mobile offices?
So maybe I'll start and then pass the floor to Paul. I think it's fair to say that we have conversations about biometrics probably on a weekly basis. As the minister said, the issue of biometric collection, particularly inside Afghanistan, is a real challenge. We can collect biometrics in other countries, which we're doing in Pakistan, but the inside Afghanistan piece is really difficult. And none of our allies have cracked this nut because, as the minister said, the ability to collect biometrics in Afghanistan securely, given the security situation that some of your colleagues have noted, is just really challenging. But let me pass the floor to Paul.
So reach-outs have been happening to, Mr. Chair, the reach-outs have been happening to the EU and Germany in terms of, that was, I think, in January, February, and through what is almost weekly conversations with like-minded in terms of taking a pulse of what is happening on the ground, where there is perhaps movements that others have discovered or not. That is sort of what we're all trying, as my colleague has suggested, trying to find a way forward, because we all desire, whether it's Canada's 40,000 commitment or for certain countries who still have their former locally engaged staff still trapped in the country, we're all trying to find a way forward to extract them out in what is very challenging circumstances.
Has the consideration of utilizing ex-military to collect biometrics being considered?
Mr. Chair, well, I think the issue becomes still what is Canada's duty of care to any party, whether it's ex-military or not, based on the security situation on the ground. So that still has to be triaged, whether it's a Government of Canada personnel or whether it's through some sort of arrangement. That legal obligation of duty of care still rests on the Government of Canada from a legal exposure perspective. So that is one issue. And then I think the other issue is, how do you move forward in a way that also respects, if it does, a criminal code? And so there needs to be sort of a legal review of that undertaking, I think, hypothetically.
Just
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. Your time is up, and appreciate that. And we'll go to the second round now, and we'll start with Mr. Raff for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll start off, going back to some of the testimony that we've heard throughout this committee and that I've heard firsthand, going back right to the evacuation, about the lack of coordination between Global Affairs Canada, IRCC, D&D during the evacuation. And so my question to the officials, Chair, is how would they assess the efficiency and effectiveness of interdepartmental coordination and communication during the evacuation?
Officials, please respond.
I'd be happy to start, and then I'll ask my colleague Julie Sunday to jump in. Both of us were very much engaged during the actual evacuation period. And there's maybe 2 points that I would make. One is the collaboration between National Defence, IRCC, and Global Affairs Canada was really excellent. We had at Global Affairs Canada embedded in our Emergency Watch and Response Centre officials from National Defence. We had CAF individuals there, IRCC. We had an integrated team. the challenge really was the situation on the ground. It was utterly chaotic. We all saw the images of the airport, which was the only way to get out. So actually being able to effectively conduct an evacuation in such a difficult situation was really the issue rather than the collaboration between departments. But I'll maybe ask Julie if she wants to add anything.
I would just add, very quickly, we met daily, and of course the Emergency Watch Response Center, where we had our teams. We had IRCC, DND embedded with us. The week of the evacuation was a huge operation. On the 25th, for example, we had almost 250 staff surged in there to support the evacuation. That week was, as my colleague mentioned, very chaotic, but we also were in a context where the security situation at HKIA in Kabul was deteriorating rapidly. And of course, there was the attack on the 26th at the gate of the airport. So
thank you for that. It's I do appreciate your opinion on how it was. It does contradict very much what we heard firsthand from many of the military personnel on the ground, including former colleagues of mine. Previous large-scale evacuations utilized a lead department or a lead minister. Why wasn't there a lead department or minister assigned in this case for this evacuation?
Officials?
So what I can say with respect to ministerial engagement is particularly around Global Affairs Canada's ministers' engagement. And I have to say, myself and Mr. Topol, Ms. Sunday, as well as other Government of Canada officials briefed the minister at the time, Minister Garneau, on a daily basis. We had a Four Corners meeting with the Privy Council Office and other departments on a daily basis. So there was intensive coordination between departments and engaging ministers and the centre throughout that period.
So, and I appreciate that there was that coordination going on. It just unfortunately didn't seem to fall out with the necessary coordination from everything that we've heard on the ground. And it's been successful in the past. If we look at Syria, when a lead department is put forward, in your opinion, what department should have been the lead for this during the evacuation?
So maybe I could just, sorry, Mr. Chair, maybe I could just make a point about the comparison with Syria. I think one of the issues that helped us enormously in the Syria situation was that all of the individuals that we were trying to bring to Canada were already outside of Syria. It wasn't the kind of context that existed in Afghanistan. And I think the member is absolutely correct to say that it was chaotic on the ground, even with coordination back in Ottawa to actually try to do things effectively on the ground was really challenging. So I think that is a very fair point to make with respect to the context around the airport in those days of the evacuation.
15 seconds.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I didn't really answer the question. I want to know which department should be the lead. My final question, and I'll accept it if they can submit it in writing afterwards, Chair, is has a lessons learned exercise or an after-action review been conducted by Global Affairs Canada? If so, will it be made public? And if not, when will it be done?
If you want to respond, please respond.
Sure. Maybe I can just go back to the last question the member asked, which is that in terms of lead department, Global Affairs Canada does have the lead for international consular situations and emergencies like this. So there is a lead established under Canadian law. And in terms of lessons learned, we always do lessons learned on large consular and other emergencies of this nature.
Thank you, Mr. Raff, and we'll go to Mr. Sidhu. Mr. Sidhu, go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And first off, I'd like to thank our wonderful team from Global Affairs for your incredibly hard work and for joining us tonight. It's not easy work, and the audit number of variables and challenges make your job even harder. So I just want to say thank you for that. Our committee has heard about the difficulties that Afghans have faced fleeing Afghanistan and making their way to neighboring countries before coming to Canada. As you're aware, Pakistan has welcomed a significant number of refugees, and there are always humanitarian concerns with refugees fleeing areas of conflict. Just the other day, 336 Afghan newcomers arrived at the Toronto airport from Pakistan, and I was at the airport earlier or a few weeks ago with Minister Fraser to welcome over 300 Afghan refugees from another neighboring country. Can you speak to the work Canada is doing with Pakistan and other countries bordering Afghanistan to ensure Afghans are able to leave?
Sure. I'll start and pass it once again to Mr. Topol. We have, as Minister Joly mentioned, there's been an enormous amount of engagement with neighboring countries. And of course, Pakistan has played a particular role because of the long border between the two countries and the fact that there are a fair number of flights that go between the two countries as well. But Paul, maybe I can just ask you to respond in more depth.
Mr. Topol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, it's a really good question, and notwithstanding a previous response whereby we don't have protocols in place now, we do need to commend the government of Pakistan for what it has done in terms of response during that very pivotal time post the fall of Kabul until November, whereby they acquiesced to our advocacy in terms of what we could provide in terms of identified lists of vulnerable individuals that we knew were going to be crossing the border, and then having them sort of ensure that their border guards were apprised of those lists and making sure that those documents were recognized in order to cross over, for which then significant deployment of personnel went into our High Commission in Islamabad in order to therefore then go with the next step once they had crossed the border, and in terms of then proceeding with biometric screening and then once the processing of that those individuals were assured, then arranging flights, charter flights, which is why there is now over 12,000 individuals from various parts coming through into Canada. So it's been a significant lift.
Mr. Chair, point of order. Mr. Chair, the bells have started ringing. I suggest that we sit till 8:30. That still gives us an additional 10 minutes to get to votes. So I ask that you seek the consent of the committee to do that, to sit to 8:30.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chong. Excellent suggestion. I hope I have the unanimous consent from the committee to proceed till the next. Okay, thank you. We'll continue to finish this round off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Minister Topol, can you share with the committee the multilateral work that is being done with Canada's allies to support the people of Afghanistan? We did touch upon Pakistan, but just generally in the region.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the Minister noted in her remarks, there have been significant reach outs to beyond Pakistan. Qatar comes, I think, first to mind because they were they played a pivotal role in terms of staging, in terms of aircraft and logistics supports during that time, as well as Kuwait for the air bridge that CAF forces had put into place. I think we also need to acknowledge that there have been myriad pathways by Afghans who have found their way out, regardless of whether they had the right documentation, and therefore trying to ensure that these countries were apprised of Canada's commitment to return them, and ensuring that they were ensuring that there was time for our embassies in order to engage with these individuals, go through the screening, the application processing, and therefore, once approved, in order to then organize those charters, has been beyond just Pakistan, but different countries where Afghans have found themselves, and trying to find a way forward if they met the application process requirements in order to come. And so that has resulted in not just those countries in the region, but many countries where Afghans beyond essentially the Persian Gulf And that also has been further supplemented in terms of intelligence conversations that I've been having with our like-minded who all have the same challenges going forward. So it really has been an international diplomatic engagement that has been beyond the norm in order to share information, understand what is succeeding, what is not working, adjusting advocacy methods as we engage with a multitude of countries to ensure safe passage where possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sidhu. We'll go to Mr. Bruno Tissap for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our witnesses this evening. It'll be my last opportunity to speak to you. You alerted to Syria in 2015. But there's something that occurred in the crisis in 2015 with biometrics. They were done upon arrival on Canadian soil by Canadian Border Services Agency officers, and they confirmed in their testimony that that was the case. So why are things different? Why would you have Syrians do biometric tests on Canadian soil in 2015 and yet not for the Afghans or Ukrainians in 2022? What explains that difference, please, of approach?
I'm afraid that Sorry,
ahead,
Mr.
please.
Chair. I'm afraid I wasn't involved in the details of the Syria effort at the time, so I'm not quite sure how the biometrics were done at that point. So I can't speak to that, I'm afraid. If other officials on the line can, they'd be most welcome to jump in.
Any other official want to respond? Please go ahead.
The comparison, just so that you're aware, Mr. Chair, the comparison I was making was in terms of actually the safe passage.
No, I understand. I was just trying to make the distinction. Now, what do you think about this? I think that this was a shortcoming of Global Affairs Canada and IRCC's. There doesn't seem to be any urgent mechanisms that exist that IRCC or GAC could use in the case of an international conflict like we're seeing in Ukraine or in Afghanistan in the case of a natural disaster. For example, the Haitian earthquakes. What about an emergency mechanism that would be put at the disposal of Global Affairs Canada and IRCC in times of crises, a little bit like the Emergency Measures Act that would apply to international conflicts, and that would give you leverage? How would you consider that?
20 seconds, please.
What I would say is that we actually have a mechanism like that already. We have an emergency watch and response center set up at Global Affairs Canada, and this is the point where we coordinate the response to international emergencies. We stand up an emergency response team when a major crisis happens, and we bring in the partner departments that we need to...
But not IRCC.
Very much for your
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci à tout le monde.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you, witnesses.
To Madam Kwan for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to ask them to clarify for officials so they know what documentation I'm looking for. Specifically, I'd like to get the officials to table how many GAC referred people were submitted to IRCC and how many have been issued a G number that they're aware of those that's been referred, and how many have arrived in Canada. As well, I like to have officials submit how many do not have a G number to which they have referred to GAC, referred to IRCC, the GAC referrals, and when was the first and last referral made to IRCC from GAC. Also, if officials can...
Sorry, go ahead.
If officials can advise whether or not women athletes have applied to GAC for referrals, and if they have made any of those referrals to IRCC.
Thank you. And I will go to Associate Deputy Minister. Please respond.
I'll pass the floor to Mr. Topol, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Sure, no problem. Mr. Topol, go ahead, please.
So, Mr. Chair, we would be very much pleased to provide answers to all those questions just based on data that I have in front of me, just to be helpful to respond to the members' questions. It's a fluid situation, and the numbers are always working nicely in terms of the increase of how many Afghans are coming, perhaps not as fast as we would all like, for sure. But recently we had.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm just actually fast running out of time, and I've got one more question. If I could actually get those that information submitted to the committee, to the clerk, that would be great, and we can share it with everyone. Just very quickly, I like to ask, in terms of ongoing work on this file, is GAC still accepting referrals at this point in time? And would you support having IRCC expand the referral groups to, let's say, Amnesty International?
13 seconds.
Mr. Chair, we are receiving, as I may have said, through our GAC intake box, still inquiries every day. But the answer to the question is really the prerogative of the Minister for IRCC. And it's that minister that really should be here to respond to that question.
Thank you. We'll go to Madam Finley for.
I think Madam Finley
5 minutes.
I think Madam Finley, Mr. Chair, has passed her time along to me.
Okay, go ahead, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Madam Finley. I have a question about agriculture. I think it's safe to say that the largest humanitarian crisis in the world today is in Afghanistan. Mr. Baker was talking about the impact of the war in Ukraine, one of the world's great breadbaskets, on global food production and on the situation in Ukraine, in Afghanistan, I should say. Canada is one of the great food baskets, bread baskets of the world. Half of our global food production, many argue, comes from natural gas through the Haber-Bosch process, which produces synthetic nitrogen, which has allowed for a significant increase in crop yields in recent decades. A lot of the fertilizer we use in Ontario is Russian fertilizer produced through natural gas. The department is responsible for the tariffs that were recently announced, the sanctions on Russian fertilizer of 35%. This is causing a lot of Ontario's farmers to raise alarm bells about the spring crop going into the ground. Many of these farmers purchased the fertilizer last year before the war in Ukraine broke out, and they are asking the Canadian government to waive the implementation of the tariff on fertilizers, nitrogen fertilizer in particular, that was purchased before March of this year. So 2 questions. First, are there plans by the department to waive the tariffs on fertilizer purchased before March of this year? An urgent question, considering that spring planting is taking place as we speak. And secondly, what is the government doing to ensure that going forward we have a replacement for synthetic nitrogen fertilizer from sources other than Russia?
Officials, please go ahead.
I'm afraid, Mr. Chair, that this is probably more in the purview of the Minister of Agriculture. This is not my area of expertise, so I apologize. I don't have the answer to those questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
I'll go to Honourable Member Mr. Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to flag this as a concern. We seem to be seized at the top line about the potential food shortages that we could be looking at this fall, but we don't seem to be reacting to farmers on the ground in this country who, through provincial and national organizations, are raising alarm bells about the huge tariffs that are being imposed on nitrogen fertilizer. This is directly impacting farmers as we speak. The land is drying out. Wheat, soybean, and corn crops are going in, and they are making decisions as we speak about what to do. And the price of fertilizer, if it's 35% higher, particularly for purchases that they made before the war started, is going to have a direct impact on how much they apply and how much yield they're going to get. And you compound that with the fact that only about 20% of the corn crop in northern Ukraine has been planted. We could be looking at an intersection of a number of issues here that could have pretty devastating consequences for the people in Afghanistan and people in other developing countries later on this year. The second set of questions I had concerned the process under the SIM, under special immigration measures. Two questions. What is the process for someone to receive a referral from Global Affairs for the SIM program? If you could quickly describe that. And secondly, what is the criteria for the referral to the SIM program, and how are applications for referral assessed? So what is the process for someone to receive a referral from Global Affairs for the SIM program, and what is the criteria for a referral to the SIM program, and how are applications for
45
referral
seconds,
assessed?
please respond.
Thank you, Chair. I believe I may have a response to that earlier, whereby we're trying to be very much consistent, given that significant volume that I had articulated earlier of over 1 million inquiries. Now, not some of them are all, it's not all the same, and sort of the challenge is to kind of go through the duplicates, but then go through trying to track what are individual bona fides, what are linked to others in terms of a family dynamic, and then go through the identification through records that we may have based on what we have available both at HQ and what may have come back from our mission in Kabul. Also from D&D's perspective, what records they have in terms of former military interpreters, in order that from our perspective for the GAC ones, we ensure that we do that check related to that criteria reference, which is, did they pass the test of a significant or enduring relationship to the Government of Canada, employee, former employee, contractors, or so on. Once we have enough information to validate that, that's only when we go over. So it's a very methodical one that we're being very consistent. The challenge is that it does take time. It's very manual.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chong. Honorable Chong, your time was up. And now we'll go to the last honorable member, Mr. El-Khoury. Go ahead, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to our witnesses. Your presence is just so appreciated. Now, my first question is directed at Ms. Hullen. An analysis of the situation published by the Peace Institute demonstrates that sanctions may have unexpected consequences, such as delayed or reduced operations due to administrative and legal complexities, or because the financial institutions and businesses want to avoid taking risks as part of the sanction regime. What detail can you give us on those issues, please?
Please go ahead. Assistant Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Could I just clarify that the honourable member is referring to sanctions ongoing in Afghanistan? Yes? The
Absolutely.
Sanctions currently, yes. Okay, thank you. Ukraine was mentioned earlier. Mr. Chair, we are always concerned about unintended consequences of sanctions. I think that is fair to say, and there is no doubt that in Afghanistan, sanctions on the Taliban, which remains a listed entity under the Canadian Criminal Code and also under UN sanctions, two sets of sanctions which are applied by Canada, but which relate to one another as well, are having an impact not only on business, on individuals, on the ability to travel into the country, on the ability to deliver humanitarian assistance. That is why we are working so hard with the organizations that we are supporting, which my colleague Peter McDougall would have spoken about in terms of our ongoing humanitarian assistance to find mitigation measures to make sure that our support can continue to get into that country. Those measures, those mitigation measures, they can include contractual provisions, various forms of assurances and operational arrangements. In some cases, Canada's funding can support ongoing activities of those organizations outside of Afghanistan to free up extra money for them to use inside Afghanistan. Those are some of the mitigation measures that we have put in place. But Mr. Chairman, the reality is that although sanctions in Afghanistan are having a very serious effect, the Taliban has taken over as the de facto government of this country, and it remains a terrorist group under Canadian legislation. So those sanctions remain in place, remain very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
My second question is for Ms. Telmo-Schwarzen and as well as Ms. Sulsande. What do you believe are the main challenges to do with getting funds to Afghan beneficiaries as part of our humanitarian effort? And what do you believe that Canada can do, what more can Canada do to improve the status of women in those countries?
Mr. Chair.
Minister, 1 minute to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a very good question. I think we are certainly working very hard to ensure that funds that do go into Afghanistan from Canada through other organizations get to the people who need them. And as we've spoken about before, the organizations that we work with, UN organizations, the WFP, UNICEF, these are organizations that have a lot of experience working in difficult areas like Afghanistan, and are very practiced at ensuring that those funds get to where they need to. They also have very important relationships on the ground that enable them to get to the right people. I should also say that even though the security situation is not good in Afghanistan, for some of our UN partners, they actually have easier access in some parts of the country than they did prior to the August takeover of Kabul by the Taliban. So there is access to some of these places, and we continue to work very hard to ensure that our funding and our humanitarian assistance goes to the most vulnerable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alkori. Your time is up, and on behalf of the committee members, I would like to thank the respected officials who've been here today for their input to this committee and their work for Canada. Appreciate that. The very best to all of you. And I'm not going to mention your names again because of the time constraints, but do appreciate that on behalf of the committee. And on behalf of the committee, I would also like to thank the sports staff, the interpreters, analysts, of course, the clerk of the committee. And let's call the meeting adjourned, and we can go back to our voting. And thank you. I would love to say the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.